gun violence in the United States is an issue that has been there, it seems like, forever. And given that I haven't been around forever, I guess I'm really not one to talk about the everness of gun violence. However, in recent times, there's been many issues made about gun violence in the US. And so I took some time out to think about how this gun violence is presenting and why. And there's a stack of stuff that you can get on YouTube at the moment, or you can have a look at on mainstream media, in particularly in the US, relating to why gun violence seems to become a major issue right at the moment. And that is primarily because of the number of deaths that are occurring, obviously, in the US, but also the types of deaths that have been occurring. Yesterday, I was having a conversation with my wife about this, and she told me of 3 incidences that she had heard, I think, or been notified of in terms of her Twitter feed in relation to this particular issue. And I have posted before about gun violence in the US. It is a concern to me, no matter where violence is occurring around the world, that there are people who are being killed, and that we as a society tend to do nothing about it. Now, I'm going to really highlight what we here in Australia have done. I'll bring up some statistics to demonstrate to you in just a moment. But I was watching a snippet from MSNBC and the Morning Joe show. Now, I'm not a fan of Joe Scarborough, just want to state that. I think he's an arrogant, self-centered individual. But in this particular snip, he is talking about the range of the violence that has happened in the US and how that has impacted his country. And no one ever presents a solution to this problem necessarily, even though there are simple solutions, as we've been demonstrated here in Australia and in New Zealand and in other parts of the world. But the United States are a bit deaf to actually dealing with this issue because of their constitutional amendments that says they can carry guns. So, and what that means culturally to them. So even though I try to understand that idea, I really struggle with it, given that that there are heaps of unnecessary, stupid deaths that occur primarily because people are infatuated with their guns. So I'll just play this snippet from Joe, and it's quite informative. The reason why I'm showing, I wouldn't normally show Joe Scarborough, but in this particular instance, it is relatively informative. So I will show it to you, and we'll talk about it as we go through it.
All of these incidents, all of these tragedies, you have a teenager with friends that go up the wrong driveway, and as they're pulling out, they get shot and the girl gets killed. You of course have the terrible story out of Kansas City where a young man knocking on a door to get his younger twin brothers knocks on the wrong door.
A mass shooting at a Sweet 16 party.
You have a mass shooting in Alabama at a Sweet 16 party. And a Sweet 16 party where the sheriff says he can't really finish the press conference because he's afraid he's going to break down because it's just so crushing. You have a teenager who's a cheerleader who's won just about every award her friends say that she could win as a cheerleader. They go to the wrong car. And then as they're fleeing, they get shot. This gun culture is touching all aspects.
I just want to point out that in each of these cases that Joe's talking about, there are young people. There's a 6-year-old, which he talks about in a moment, who is shot. There are people doing innocent things, just normal things. One person goes to the wrong house, easy mistake to make. Another one, a basketball rolls down a driveway, and that's a 6-year-old, I think, and someone decides to shoot her. So these are innocent, everyday events that happen in every community at some point, and yet because of these events, because these people are innocently carrying on with their lives, they are shot. There is no logical or reasonable explanation, I think, for any of this bizarre behaviour.
Of society, and
daily life.
More and more Americans are seeing their daily lives shattered by gun violence. This year, just in the first 3.5 months of this year, more Americans have been killed by guns than were killed in 20 years of fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan. Think about that. American troops in war zones for 2 decades in Iraq and Afghanistan. And we heard about the tolls, the terrible tolls from those wars, unforgivable tolls from those wars. And yet we let our...
I personally find that the most horrific statistic at all is that this country would spend literally trillions of dollars going to fight wars, in which I do need to add that they killed hundreds of thousands of people themselves. So there's what I see as an extremely violent nation, and Joe doesn't talk about this, and why would you? He used to be a Republican, and he doesn't confront the real issues that sit within his country anyway, because he's a frigging coward. But the reality is that even though the statistics are that more people have been killed in the last 3 months than were killed in 20 years of fighting in Afghanistan and elsewhere, and that's horrific in itself. It doesn't discount the view that, or the idea that the United States has killed hundreds of thousands of people throughout these wars either. So this is a violent nation, and we need to understand that. I think we need to accept it. They need to understand it, that they are a violent nation, and there are reasons why this nation has become so violent. And I'll try and probably expand on that as we go through this video.
Our children be slaughtered in schoolhouses. We let our teenagers get gunned down in driveways. We let church goers, parishioners get shot up in churches, in church pews, and the pain stays with them for decades. We let worshipers in synagogues get slain. Nigga, this is what, 2 things. One, it's a choice that we're making as a nation. This is a choice that we are making. More specifically, it is a choice that Republican legislators in state houses are making. Extreme positions, and people are dying because they refuse to pass basic gun safety legislation, the likes of which they've passed in state.
Don't you like the way that they're now calling it the gun violence epidemic? Gun violence in the United States has been prevalent for probably over 100 years. More so today because of the types of weapons that are available, particularly in relation to the assault rifles. And Joe himself has admitted that he's a gun carrier, or he has a license to carry a gun. And so there's this whole notion that the country itself is, or people within the country feel so unsafe, and they're fed a whole host of right-wing propaganda from organisations like Fox News and OAN and Newsmax that tells them all the time that they're under threat, and that it also tells them it has a racial component whereby it tells them that black people are the ones that are out to get you, that immigrants are the ones that are out to get you and to replace you and all that sort of crap. And there's the Jewish tropes, and there's a whole lot of negative views of minority groups in particular in the United States that breeds and feeds and causes this notion around gun violence to fester. And, why are we surprised that they're out doing what they, a lot of people do what they do, shoot innocent people, because for whatever reason, I don't know why you could be afraid of a 6-year-old simply coming out your drive chasing after a basketball, but this is the type of culture that they have. And unfortunately, they are suffering. The communities, as Joe rightfully says, the communities are now suffering from their neglect on this particular issue in relation to holding guns. I'll play a little bit more of it, and then I'll show you some really interesting statistics, I think, that proves what a stupid, fucked up country they actually are.
It's like Connecticut, California, now Michigan. That's one. Two, understand, if you're younger, it hasn't always been this way. I sat down and talked to President Bill Clinton a couple of days ago in Belfast about the peace agreement there, but we had to talk about the violence at home. And I told him, I said, it was the tragedy of Columbine was so shocking, but back then we thought that was a one-off.
Right.
Now
it was a shocking, unusual scenario.
The number of gun killings have doubled since Sandy Hook.
Leading cause
10
of
years
death
ago.
in children.
Now the leading cause of death in children.
If I may, it's not just the mass shootings, which is horrific as it is, but a lot of Republicans will say, well, talk about mental health. Talk about mental health?
Yeah.
Think about all the kids in Uvalde, all the kids in the different mass shootings and school shootings in Nashville who survived, and their mental health. Think about the Sweet 16 party, where the girl who celebrated her 16th birthday lost her brother and watched him die. That's talking about mental health, because all of these...
I actually think that this is, her name's escaped me at the moment, but I know it's Joe's wife, but I'm sure someone will remind me. But this point about mental health is a really good point, and it's I guess it's relevant that it comes from her, because I don't think Joe necessarily would think of this himself. But the issue is that there are so many people in the community who are collateral damage in relation to all of these shootings. You know, family members, brothers, sisters, parents, obviously, uncles, aunts, and others, and community members in general who are impacted by this. And then there are those that have survived all these shootings, particularly the school shootings. That there are now situations where some people have experienced in their life not just one school shooting, but multiple school shootings. And sometimes these are teachers and sometimes these are kids, I think. So, you know, and how does that trauma impact you, and how does that shape the rest of your life? Well, my guess is that issues such as anxiety, stress, post-traumatic stress disorder, paranoia, and other unhelpful conditions would dominate and would take over your life. There'd be lots of people who'd be agoraphobic as a result of the experiences that they've had. There's lots of people who simply just wouldn't trust others because of the situations they've encountered. So she makes a really good point here.
Mass shootings. We had another mass shooting this past week. I'm trying to even remember where it was, where 28 were injured.
Yeah.
Every single one of those people traumatized by being shot and watching other people get shot dead.
It's unbelievable.
That's a mental health crisis.
Well, and Willie, guys, it's so interesting. I hear Republicans, because they don't want to talk about guns, they don't want to talk about the 165 mass shootings so far in 2023. So they'll talk about mental health. So let's talk about mental health. Mental health funding in the United States of America is tragically low. It's tragically low. You have so many healthcare providers, mental health care providers, that do not get paid for doing their job. Not by the insurance companies, not through government funding. And so there's so many kids that aren't getting that sort of mental health counseling they need. So, okay, we can do two things at once. We can talk about gun safety, but we can also talk about mental health. And if they really want to talk about mental health, go ahead, pass the bill.
Yeah.
Double the funding, triple the funding, put in place.
No one disagrees.
And I think the issue for me primarily around all of this is the fact you shouldn't have any frigging guns to start with. And I'm going to show some statistics in relation to that. And I want to have a look specifically at, where am I? want to have a look at specifically this particular screen, which is total number of gun deaths in Australia. Now, you'll be able to see that if I just can bring this up for you, that just in this area here, we had some, this was 1996 or 98, somewhere in there, 96 it was. We had, you can see at the top here, we had a massacre here in Australia at Port Arthur in Tasmania. And as a result of that, we banned guns. And you can see the dramatic drop in gun ownership, or the number of deaths in related to guns from that period. It dropped significantly. We've never had a massive problem here in Australia, but the number of deaths, once we took the guns away, it dropped. And to a 2019 figure, which is this one here, you can see that it was 229. So as a result, it is evident that once you take guns away, that you will find that the number of people that die as a result decreases significantly. Now, when we have a look at the world as a total in terms of number of gun deaths, it produces what I think is a fascinating graph, and I'll come to that in just a second. This, I just don't know whether I'll be able to bring this up entirely, but I'll do my best. So this is a graph of the number of gun deaths. So at the top here we have Brazil, which has 40. This is over 12 months. This is based on per 100,000 people. So this is in relation to population, and we have in Brazil 49,437. I don't know what there is about Brazil that causes that to happen, but there is. But then we have the United States, which is 37,040 total deaths as a result of guns. Mexico, no surprise, they have 22,118, far less than what I expected, given the number of the amount of criminality in that particular country. India was a surprise at 14,000, but they have 1 billion people as their population, but that's based on population, so that was a surprise. And as I go down here, one of the things that I noticed is that Australia doesn't feature at all, because we have so few we don't even meet on this particular scale. And does that make us the safest country on earth? Probably does, actually. And is that something we as Australians should be proud of? Yes, it is. But it does make me wonder how the country that has kept telling us over the years that they're the greatest country on earth, the United States, actually isn't. If you're going to work out what's the greatest country on the earth based on how you respect others and the social services that you offer, then countries like Norway, Finland, the Scandinavian countries probably rise to the top of that list, and the United States falls to the bottom, particularly when you look at the number of people that are murdered, killed as a result of a policy and a program and a culture that says that holding a gun is far more significant than not holding one. And when you believe that, it's better to have a good person with a gun than a bad person, because the good person will always kill the bad person. And then you look at the young women that had died and the young 6-year-old who was shot, you certainly got to wonder about those particular ideas as well. So be interested to know what you think. The gun culture in the United States is something which is going to cause a great deal of concern, further concern over the years, and that doesn't seem to be anything that the United States Congress is able to deal with, that they will never, ever be able to eradicate the use of guns, and more people as a result will get killed. If you wish to have a comment, conversation with me about this, feel free to email me. And also remember to subscribe to my channel for any further notifications of videos that will appear over the next coming days. So take care, everybody. Look after yourselves. And more importantly, be safe, eh?